some people claim that Putin is a new Charlemagne who wants to restore Christendom. Is that true? Well, that's a very good question because so many people today, and I'm speaking about conservatives, they like Putin, whom they oppose to Western decadence. They say that he opposes LGBT ideology, he favors the family, etc., etc. So basically, they present him as a Charlemagne or as a Constantine or anyway, as a person who's going to save the West from the cultural and moral decadence. Is this so? In order to answer this with a certain depth, please excuse me if I'm a bit specious, but I need to give a doctrinal introduction to this. You know, the Marxist concept of truth is very well explained by Karl Marx in his book Thesis on Feuerbach. The 11th thesis on Feuerbach, he says, truth is not that is thought, but that is done. So truth is not something intellectual, it's something practical. What is truth? In Marxist philosophy, in Marxist thinking, it doesn't make any sense to say, is this true, is this false? What makes sense is, does this conduce me to the implantation of communism? Does this favor communism? Does this favor what I want to do? If it favors, then it's good. For example, excuse me for the shocking example, but it's literally true. If to get my way, I have to kill my mother, that assassination, that matricide becomes good because it's a thing that I have to do in order to attain the goal that I want. Now, this is the Marxist concept of truth. So you see, it's not an orthodoxy, but an orthopraxis is what I do. Now, logically, from this, logically comes a very pragmatic spirit. Russian communists and Soviet communists are very pragmatic, notwithstanding some people would think that they are ideologues. They're actually pragmatists. Take, for example, what would you say if I give you the example of a president who outlawed abortion, practically outlawed divorce, favored the family, outlawed homosexuality, reopened the church that had been persecuted by his predecessor, convoked 2 synods in order to establish the church. He brought back all the clergy that had been persecuted by his predecessor, and he called his people brothers. What would you say about such a president? You would say he was a good president, of course. Well, this president was Josef Vissarionovich Djougashvili, better known as Stalin. Indeed, when Stalin perceived that they would have to fight a war, that he needed a strong Russia, he directly abolished abortion, he almost abolished divorce, he favored the family in order to have people, in order to have citizens from whom to make soldiers in order to fight the war. He understood that he had to govern with the Orthodox Church. So he refounded the Orthodox Church that had been closed down and persecuted by his predecessor, Lenin. He called back from Siberia, from the concentration camps, all the Orthodox clergy that had been exiled to the concentration camps. He reopened all the churches. He called 2 synods, Synod of Moscow and the Synod of Lviv in Ukraine, in order to establish the Russian Orthodox Church. He refounded the so-called Moscow Patriarchate. So if you see what he did, well, he outlawed homosexuality. Homosexuality hadn't been actually made legal by Lenin, but Lenin had abolished all the Tsarist laws against homosexuality because he had a very radical minister of culture, Alexandra Kollontai, who was the one who introduced all the cultural revolution in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Well, Stalin finished with all that, and he actually reopened the churches, and he refounded the Russian Orthodox Church with the condition that the Orthodox Church become an instrument of the Soviet government, of the Soviet state. Now, this is also very, very interesting. I will go into it a little bit further. Take, for example, the attitude the Bolshevik revolutionaries in 1970 adopted vis-à-vis the imperial past. Unlike the French revolutionaries, the Jacobins, who destroyed all the king's palaces and all what could recall the Ancien Regime in France, the Bolsheviks, the Soviet Bolsheviks, they preserved all the imperial palaces. Lenin made a law forbidding to touch the imperial palaces. Why? Because, as I said first, Russians like the power. And he figured out that he had to fit into the Tsar's shoes, so to speak. He had to fit into this image of a strong autocrat and sacral ruler. This is why he preserved the Winter Palace, which is now the Hermitage Museum. He preserved Tsarskoye Selo, the palace, which is some miles outside of St. Petersburg, etc., etc., etc. And this is why today, for example, if you go to St. Petersburg, the old Leningrad, and at midday, you go to the Basilica of St. Peter and St. Paul, right in the center of St. Petersburg. There's a beautiful bell tower. At midday, it sounds the Russian imperial anthem. You will say, but how can they sound the imperial anthem? Because it's to give the idea to the people that the empire is still there. The Tsar today is called Vladimir Putin. They have this mentality. Another point, I said that the power is sacral. For them, what is important is sacred Russia. They call it the Holy Russia. And this Russia is contained within the canonical territory of Holy Russia. And this is another reason why Russia has to occupy the spaces which they consider the canonical territory of Holy Russia. A little bit like Hitler spoke about the Lebensraum, the vital space for the German people, the Volksraum. They speak of the canonical territory of Holy Russia. And this is another reason why they have to invade all these countries, because they consider them part of Holy Russia. Now, Holy Russia in two senses. First of all, that the person who rules Holy Russia is ipso facto holy. They venerate Stalin as a saint. If you go to the Russian churches, you will see all over the place icons with icons of Stalin with a saintly aura around his head. They sell in the streets holy cards with Stalin with a holy aura, and you will see also this type of holy cards and icons of Putin. Because if Putin is governing Holy Russia, ipso facto, he is also holy. Not because of any personal virtue, but because of the fact that he's governing Holy Russia. In this Holy Russia, the head of the sacrality of Holy Russia is the Tsar. is the person who is concretely governing Russia. This Tsar has under him the state and the church, which form one. The head of the Orthodox Church was the Tsar. And when Stalin reconstituted the Orthodox Church, he put it at the service of the Soviet Union. In order to be ordained an Orthodox priest, you needed to be part of the KGB. The patriarch, the so-called Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, he was a Soviet agent. His code name was Tavarish Mihailovich, Comrade Mihailovich. His predecessor, Patriarch Alexis, his code name was Tavarish Dvozdov. They were both agents of the KGB. That was also so for the clergy. This has more or less ended, but in any case, even today, the Orthodox Church is part of the Russian state. Putin is no longer the head of the church. This was ended with the 1997 new constitution of the Russian Federation, but in reality, he is like this. Now, Putin also understands, and I might say that this goes to his favor, but to his favor in the sense of this Marxist concept of orthopraxis that I explained. He understands that if he lets Western decadence infiltrate Russia, Russia will crumble in a couple of years. Because we can withstand this sort of decadence for much longer. We will also crumble if this decadence continues. But we can withstand it much longer because our society is much sounder. It's much more sound. It's much more solid than Russian society. So he understands that he cannot permit homosexuality, rampant homosexuality. Be careful. Homosexuality is not outlawed in the Russian Federation. The only thing that is outlawed is homosexual propaganda to minors. But homosexual propaganda to adult audience is perfectly legal, is perfectly legitimate. Homosexual nightclubs and places are perfectly legal, and indeed they abound both in St. Petersburg and Moscow, which is the two cities that I know better. So he's not against homosexuality because it goes against Christian faith and Christian virtue. He's against homosexuality because he perceives, and he's right, he perceives in homosexuality an element of decadence and therefore of deliquescence of the social and cultural and spiritual fabric of the nation. He supports Christianity. Yes, exactly as I said. He supports the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. Why? Because this church is part of his state. He was the head of this church and up to a certain point. In this sense, he supports Christianity, in the sense that he supports Holy Russia. He is not against abortion. Russia is the country with the most radical, more liberal abortion law in the world and with the highest abortion rates in the world. And Putin has not only permitted this law to continue, but has even worsened this law I think in 2017. So he's pro-abortion. Putin is pro-abortion. Russia is one of the very few countries that permits surrogate motherhood, what they call here in Italy womb to hire, surrogate motherhood. That is, you go and pay a Russian girl to have your own baby. This is perfectly legal in Russia up to now. There is a law being discussed in the Duma, in parliament, in order to restrain the surrogate motherhood to Russian residents. But you see, it's not a problem of morals, it's a problem of Russian spirit.